There is a peculiar silence that lives in the hearts of some men. A silence not born of peace, but of absence. The absence of initiation, of hardship, of confrontation with the dark gods within. These men walk among us with adult bodies, yet inside, they remain fragile boys yearning for the comforts of a mother's arms or the praise of a father they never truly challenged. They chase pleasure but evade purpose. They speak of ambition but flee responsibility. They are not wicked, merely unformed. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." But what of the man who has never lived his own life at all? The man-child, a modern phenomenon with ancient roots, is not a cartoonish trope but a deeply psychological truth. He is the soul who fears his own depth. He avoids decisions. He romanticizes rebellion, yet fears maturity as though it were death. And in a way it is. For to grow up truly is to sacrifice the boy within. Not to kill him, but to transmute his dreams into action, his fantasies into virtue, his fears into wisdom. But many never do. Not because they are incapable, but because the culture, the family, and the ego conspire to keep the boy alive. It is easier to remain in Neverland than to become the captain of one's ship today. We explore this phenomenon not through pop psychology or societal critique, but through the eyes of depth psychology, myth, and the timeless voice of ancient philosophy. What does it truly mean to grow up? Why do some men resist that call? And what becomes of the soul when boyhood becomes a prison? Carl Jung believed that every man contains within him an inner architecture, a psychic map that spans the boy he once was, the man he is becoming, and the shadow he fears. This map is not merely a set of stages or roles, but a living process, a journey toward wholeness he called individuation. The man-child, in Jungian terms, is a soul who has refused the path of individuation. He resists the natural psychic death of adolescence, the moment when the child must die so the adult can be born. But what does that death mean? Jung identified various archetypes within the male psyche. Among them, the poor Aternus, the eternal boy, is perhaps the most dangerous when left unchecked. The poor is full of energy, enthusiasm, charm, and vision. But he fears commitment. He avoids structure. He is allergic to suffering. He wants to soar endlessly, but never to land. He wants the fruit of the tree without planting it. This archetype becomes pathological when the man is unable, or unwilling, to transition to its counterpart, the senex, the wise old man. The senex is stable, grounded, responsible, and enduring. He plants trees under whose shade he will never sit. He chooses burden as a path to transcendence. Jung did not demonize the poor. He recognized his beauty, the dreamer, the romantic, the artist, the visionary. But when the poor dominates the psyche, the man becomes unanchored. His soul floats above life, never engaging the soil, the suffering, the scars that make a man real. Why does this happen? In part because our modern world rewards the surface. It celebrates youth, novelty, and emotional indulgence. The journey inward, the confrontation with the shadow, the battle with the father archetype, the acceptance of responsibility, is no longer required for survival. A man can remain an adolescent into his 60s and still be functional. But functional is not the same as fulfilled. Jung warned that man cannot stand a meaningless life. And yet the man-child often lives precisely that, a life full of stimulation but devoid of initiation. He avoids becoming a father, avoids enduring love, avoids sacrifice. He seeks freedom but finds despair. He has wings but no sky. Only when he begins the slow, painful descent into his own darkness does he begin to mature. Maturity, Jung teaches, is not the acquisition of knowledge or age, but the confrontation with the self, the true center of the psyche, far deeper than the ego. In failing to begin that journey, the man-child remains a fragmented being, and worse, he becomes invisible to himself. There was a time, not so long ago, though forgotten, when boys did not become men by accident. They became men through pain, through ritual, through symbolic death and rebirth. In nearly every ancient culture, there were rites of passage as sacred thresholds where the boy was torn from the bosom of comfort and thrust into the realm of trial. He was sent into the wilderness. He was bloodied by spear, by hunger, by fear. He was made to confront death, whether literal or symbolic. Only when the ego surrendered and the soul endured did he return, no longer a boy, but a man. These rituals were not cruelty, they were mercy. For they acknowledged a fundamental truth: a man is not born, he is made. Today those rights are gone. The boy is never taken. He is never tested. He is coddled, entertained, protected from hardship, yet never truly seen. He drifts from adolescence into adulthood like a leaf on still water. No initiation, no transformation, only aging skin atop a childish soul. Carl Jung lamented the modern disappearance initiation rituals. In their absence, he believed the unconscious would invent its own. Depression, addiction, failed relationships, anxiety. These become the dark substitutes for forgotten rights. The psyche cries out to be tested, to be broken open and rebuilt. But society offers only distraction. Philosopher Mircea Eliade once wrote, "Initiation is nothing less than a death followed by resurrection, a symbolic return to the beginning. Without that death, the man remains unformed, an echo of what he might have become. He will find himself repeating the same mistakes, fleeing from responsibility, unable to anchor love, unsure of who he truly is. What was once a communal responsibility has become an individual burden. No elders take the boy by the hand. No tribe sends him into the dark. He must find the threshold alone, if he ever finds it at all, and most do not. They remain boys with grown-up toys, playing at manhood without its depth. The loss of ritual is not simply a loss of culture. It is a loss of meaning. The man-child is not lazy. He is uninitiated. He walks the earth with a soul still waiting to be born. And until that birth takes place, until he steps into his own crucible, he will fear the very thing that would set him free, suffering. In the depths of the male psyche, there lies a binding force that Carl Jung called the mother complex, a set of unconscious attachments to the archetype of the great mother. This force is not always maternal in form, but in function it nurtures, protects, envelops, and, when distorted, imprisons. For many men who fail to grow up, this complex becomes a psychological anchor, dragging them away from maturity. The man-child is not merely immature. He is often possessed by the desire to be cared for, to be protected from consequence, to be rescued from the weight of decision, of direction, of duty. In this state, responsibility feels like a threat. It is experienced not as an honor, but as a burden imposed by a cruel world. The man-child recoils from it. He avoids long-term commitments, not just in relationships, but in vocation, in self-discipline, in self-definition. He is terrified of becoming the father, because becoming the father means the mother no longer protects him. Jung wrote, "The greatest danger that threatens the child is the mother, not because she is inherently dangerous, but because the soul must eventually detach from the maternal in order to individuate. To grow is to separate. To evolve is to lose comfort. But many men remain bound not necessarily to their literal mothers, but to what the mother symbolizes: softness, indulgence, passivity, approval without effort. They want life to nourish them endlessly. They want the womb to follow them into adulthood. This psychological dependency often plays out in relationships. The man-child may seek a partner who mothers him, forgives his failures endlessly, demands little, and reinforces his fragile ego. Or he may resent women entirely, projecting onto them his inner weakness, blaming them for the void he refuses to confront. Either way, he is lost. Responsibility is not simply a task, it is a right. It is the moment a man steps forward, faces his own trembling hands, and says, "I will carry this." Whether it be a child, a vision, a truth, or a burden, he accepts it not because easy, but because it is his. Without this shift, the man remains at war with his own masculinity. He sees strength as threat, authority as oppression, sacrifice as foolishness. But these are not limitations, they avoiding them. He avoids himself. True masculinity is not the rejection of the feminine, but the integration of it. The man who grows must walk away from the comforts of the child not in hatred, but in reverence. He must say to the mother with an "Thank you. I no longer need you to carry me. I must now carry myself." There is perhaps no myth more reflective of the man-child than that of Peter Pan, the boy who refuses to grow up, who flies above the world, laughing in the face of aging, maturity, and responsibility. But beneath the whimsy and fairy dust lies a darker truth. One Carl Jung would have recognized at once: the refusal to grow up is not freedom, it is fear. Peter Pan lives in Neverland, a dream world, unbound by rules, where boys fight pirates and play forever. But it is a world that is not real. The lost boys are not maturing, they are stranded. And Peter, though charming and adventurous, is also frozen, emotionally, psychically, and spiritually. The myth, at first glance, seduces us. Who wouldn't want to fly? Who wouldn't want to escape the dull ache of taxes, aging, betrayal, and death? But Jung would remind us, a man who avoids suffering avoids transformation. He may fly, but he will never walk with grounded dignity. The real tragedy of Peter Pan is not that he can't grow up, but that he refuses to. Wendy, the feminine principle of maturity and nurturing love, offers him the chance to return home, to become a man, to enter the world. But Peter declines. He would rather cling to the illusion of perpetual boyhood than risk the pain and beauty of life. Many modern men carry this archetype within them. They surround themselves with distraction, video games, casual flings, surface-level pursuits, endless entertainment. They fear the grounded world, not because it lacks joy, but because it demands accountability. It demands depth, it demands change. In the Peter Pan psyche, Captain Hook, the symbol of time, discipline, and death, becomes the enemy. But he is not truly a villain. He is the shadow that Peter must confront. He is the aging father, the passage of time, the loss of innocence, the very things the boy must integrate to become whole. Jung believed that the psyche will either evolve or regress. The man who rejects maturity regresses into fantasy. He becomes addicted to the imaginary, to the ideal, to the unattainable. He will seek love without sacrifice, success without discipline, identity without effort. But these are ghosts, and so, like Peter, he remains in Neverland, a place without pain, but also without purpose. True adulthood is not the death of joy. It is the birth of meaningful joy. It is not the rejection of dreams, but their incarnation through action, suffering, and love. The eternal boy fears this. But the man embraces it, because he knows that to become real is worth the pain. In the architecture of the soul, the father is not merely a parent. He is an archetype. He represents order, structure, boundary, law, protection, and transcendence. He is the one who initiates the boy into manhood, not by comfort, but by challenge. He does not shield. He sharpens. He does not coddle. He calls the child upward. But when the father is absent, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, a rupture occurs. The psyche is left without a pillar, without a bridge into adulthood. And the boy lacking this figure turns inward. He seeks substitutes. He becomes either angry or aimless. He may even reject all authority, not because he is rebellious, but because he is uninitiated. Carl Jung recognized this as the father wound, a deep psychic void where the guiding hand of masculine power should have been. A man's need for the father is not only personal, but symbolic. Without him, the inner hierarchy collapses. Without the father, the boy has no threshold to cross, no dragon to slay, no voice that says, "You are now a man." And so he remains in limbo, aging but not growing, reacting but not choosing. The man-child often carries resentment toward all authority, toward bosses, mentors, others, and even his own higher self, because they unconsciously represent the father he never reconciled with. He sees rules as oppression. He sees structure as confinement. He fears being told no, not because he is weak, but because he was never taught how to handle discipline without collapse. Every boundary feels like a wound, every correction an attack. And so he avoids mastery, he avoids confrontation, he avoids the climb. But the wound must be addressed, not through blame, but through inner reckoning. The absent father cannot be reinserted into time, but his archetype can be resurrected. A man can become his own father. He can develop the inner voice that says, "Stand up, endure, rise." He can look in the mirror and see not the abandoned child, but the man who now chooses responsibility. Jung insisted that the shadow of the father must be integrated, not avoided. The immature soul may try to destroy authority, but the mature soul becomes it, not a tyrant, not a dictator, but a stable force for his life, for others, and for his soul. This is not easy. It is a slow, painful, lonely climb, but it is the only path out of the cave. To confront the father, whether absent, weak, cruel, or unknown, is to retrieve one's manhood from the abyss. Only then can the man-child begin to disappear, not by suppression, but by evolution. Never before in human history has it been so easy to remain a boy. The modern world, with all its comforts and conveniences, has made it possible to avoid the trials that once forged character. Pain is medicated, boredom is digitized, hunger is delivered, and suffering, once a teacher, is now an enemy to be vanquished at all costs. This is the perfect breeding ground for the man-child, because where comfort abounds, growth retreats. Carl Jung did not speak of smartphones, dopamine, or fast food, but he understood deeply the human soul's tendency to seek what is easy over what is meaningful. In his own language, this was the ego's desperate attempt to avoid confrontation with the self, the deeper, darker, divine center of the psyche. And what better way to avoid it than by numbing every signal from within? The man-child is often addicted to comfort, not necessarily material, but psychological. He fears uncertainty, conflict, rejection, and delay. He seeks validation without vulnerability, connection without depth, achievement without effort. And modern technology, entertainment, and culture oblige him. He need not grow. The world will pamper him as long as he consumes. But comfort unchecked is a cage lined with silk. It appears soft, safe, and pleasant, yet it keeps the spirit confined. Muscles, unused, atrophy, dreams unpursued wither, and manhood unclaimed decays. Jung believed in the necessity of confrontation, not with others, but with oneself. The psyche, when denied adversity, turns inward upon itself. The very comforts that promise peace slowly smother purpose. The man-child often feels an inexplicable emptiness, despite his luxuries. He feels anxious in stillness, desperate in success, restless in pleasure. Why? Because he was never tested. because life did not demand his growth and he, in turn, never demanded it of himself. Marcus Aurelius warned, "You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow." The man-child delays growth endlessly. He tells himself there will be time, but time does not wait. And with each passing day of indulgence, the soul forgets how to climb. To grow up is to suffer meaningfully. It is to choose discomfort in the name of transformation. It is to break the addiction to ease and embrace the sharpened edge of life. No great man was forged in convenience. No legacy was born from laziness. The comforts of the modern world are not evil, but they are dangerous when worshipped. The man-child who lives only for pleasure will eventually drown in it, his soul gasping for the oxygen of purpose. True joy is not found in escape. It is found in earned peace. The man must chew his challenge, not because he is strong, but because he wishes to become so. Love to the man-child is not a union of souls. It is a refuge, a mirror, a fantasy. He seeks in relationships what he lacks in himself: validation, security, identity. Yet he is not prepared to offer the same in return. His love is not rooted in strength, but in need. Carl Jung taught that romantic relationships act as mirrors of the unconscious. What we refuse to face in ourselves, we project onto the other. The man-child, having never faced his inner chaos, often projects his unresolved wounds onto his partner, usually a woman who becomes both his mother and his prison. He asks for her unconditional nurturing while resenting her expectations. He craves her closeness but flees the intimacy it requires. He may seem charming, attentive, even passionate, but beneath the surface lies an emotional underdevelopment. He is overwhelmed by commitment, panicked by conflict, and often evasive when confronted. He promises change, yet fears transformation. He idealizes love, but lacks the discipline to sustain it. Jung noted, "Where love reigns, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." But the man-child seeks power through affection. He wants to be loved more than he is willing to love. He uses connection not to grow, but to be affirmed. He does not stand beside his partner as an equal. He leans on her, unconsciously demanding she carry what he refuses to develop. This imbalance poisons the union. Over time, the woman feels exhausted, unseen, even maternal. She becomes the adult in the relationship while he regresses further into adolescence. When she sets boundaries, he recoils. When she expresses needs, he withdraws. Emotional responsibility, the cornerstone of any mature relationship, is foreign to him. Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." The man-child may want to love, but without maturity he cannot will the endurance, sacrifice, and discipline that true love requires. He is a child playing with fire, enchanted by the flame, yet unaware of the burn. Some man-children sabotage their relationships when they become too real. They leave before they are left. They chase the next thrill, or they remain in relationships as passive passengers, never steering the course, never deciding, never fully arriving. Others collapse under the weight of love, because to truly love means to confront the self. And the self in the man-child is still a stranger. True partnership demands growth. It demands presence, emotional risk, and inner clarity. The man-child is not unlovable, but he must first learn to love from strength, not from weakness. Until then, his relationships will reflect not the man he could be, but the boy he refuses to outgrow. Carl Jung described a particular archetype that lives within the male psyche, the pure eternus latent fraternal boy. At first glance, this figure is radiant. He is the dreamer, the adventurer, the free spirit. He lives in potential. He climbs mountains, envisions futures, and soars above the ordinary. He is impulsive, energetic, and inspiring. But he is also incomplete. The pure is light without shadow, fire without hearth, flight without ground. And it is precisely this lack of rootedness that becomes his curse. The pure eternus resists the gravity of life. He fears becoming anchored to a job, a woman, a purpose, a place. His identity thrives in movement, in possibility, in postponement. As long as nothing is final, he is free. But that freedom, Jung warned, is often a defense against the responsibility and suffering that maturity demands. The shadow of the poor is not simply laziness or immaturity. It is spiritual avoidance. It is the refusal to engage the cycles of life that require death, the death of youth, the death of fantasy, the death of the ego. The eternal boy avoids these deaths by staying in a perpetual spring, vibrant, yes, but directionless. Jung observed that such individuals often experience deep restlessness, depression, or anxiety. Beneath the cheerful surface lies an unconscious grief, the grief of a soul untested and unfulfilled. He has not become what he was meant to become. He has merely floated. In mythology, the pure is often paired with the senex, the old man, the wise elder. These archetypes balance each other. The pure brings vision. The senex brings discipline. The poor begins, the senex sustains. But when the senex is absent, when structure is missing, the poor remains lost in potential. He starts but never finishes. He dreams but never builds. He loves but never stays. This imbalance can be seen in modern manhood: enthusiasm without purpose, rebellion without meaning, identity without substance. The man-child clings to the poor because it flatters his ego. It tells him he is special, chosen, different. But this uniqueness becomes a cage, one he cannot leave, because to grow would mean to become ordinary. But growth does not mean death to the poor. It means his transformation. The boy becomes the builder. The dreamer becomes the creator. The lover becomes the husband. The wanderer becomes the guide. To integrate the poor is to descend into life, to embrace limitation as the price of meaning, and to accept that joy is not in freedom alone, but in devotion to something greater than the self. Jung taught that wholeness comes not from fleeing shadow, but from embracing it. The eternal boy must not be banished, but he must be led. Without the senex, without the father within, the boy will remain adrift, not because he cannot grow, but because no one ever told him it's time. We live in an age where masculinity is adrift, not because it is irrelevant, but because it is uninitiated. The father, once a symbol of order, wisdom, and boundary, has faded into caricature. He is often absent, mocked, or vilified, and in his absence, a vacuum opens, one into which the man-child slips, unformed and unsure. Carl Jung foresaw this disintegration. He warned that without living archetypes, father, elder, king, guide, the psyche becomes disoriented. The culture reflects this. Modern men are often raised in homes where the father is passive or gone. Schools strip away challenge. Media praises perpetual youth, and religion, once a sanctuary for the sacred masculine, has grown hollow or hostile. The result: a generation of males who know how to consume, but not how to carry. Who know how to argue, but not know how to seduce, but not how to lead. They are not evil, they are unfathered. And the unfathered boy becomes a man without a spine. In ancient cultures, the father was more than a provider. He was a bridge to the transcendent. He passed down not only skills but meaning. He modeled sacrifice, integrity, silence, and discipline. He called the boy into his name, not just biologically, but spiritually. Without that call, the boy remains nameless in the soul. Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine forces within each psyche. For the masculine to mature, it must pass through friction. The boy must wrestle with the father, symbolically or literally, and in doing so, earn his place among men. When this ritual fails, either through absence or cultural collapse, the boy flounders. The man-child of today is not just an individual failure. He is a symptom of a larger wound. He lives in a culture that avoids seriousness, mocks hierarchy, and mistrusts maturity. He is offered distractions, not direction, pleasure, not purpose, liberation, not legacy. Yet the soul still longs for something more, a voice deeper than entertainment, a task worthy of his suffering, a place in a lineage that stretches beyond the self. Without it, he drifts into addictions, into bitterness, into perpetual adolescence. But here lies the paradox. Even in a culture without fathers, the journey is still possible. The man must become his own elder. He must summon the father within, not merely the biological echo, but the archetypal force that disciplines, uplifts, and commands. He must reforge the broken chain, not only for himself, but for those who come after. Masculinity is not toxic. It is missing, and in its absence, the boy suffers. But he need not stay there, can rise, he can build, he can return. Carl Jung did not define manhood by success, aggression, or dominance. To him, a man was forged not in conquest of others, but in confrontation with himself. He spoke often of the self, the totality of who we are beyond the ego, a divine pattern latent within every human. To grow into the self is the highest calling of man, but it requires a death. This is the truth the man-child fears most, that to become whole, something of die, with its comforts, fantasies, and fragile pride, must crack open. The illusions must burn. The boy must step into the fire of life and let go of the idea that he can float forever. This is not a death of the body, but a death of identity, of the old self that clings to safety and denies responsibility. Jung described this transformation as a psychic alchemy, a mysterious inner process where the raw metal of youth is transmuted into the gold of maturity. But this alchemy demands suffering, isolation, doubt, and a descent into what he called the shadow, the dark parts of ourselves we avoid. The man-child, unwilling to suffer, resists this descent. He stays in the upper world, clinging to appearances. Unable to differentiate between persona and soul, he may chase status, pleasure, or stimulation, but deep down he remains uninitiated. His soul knows it. It whispers to him in sleepless nights, in failed relationships, in empty victories. The rebirth of the self begins when a man stops running, When he looks into the mirror, not for validation, but for truth. He asks, not, who do others think I am? But what am I afraid to become? He listens to the silence beneath his desires, and there he finds not shame, but the call to wholeness. This death and rebirth is not a single moment. It is a life's journey. But it begins with one sacred act. The man takes responsibility for his own becoming. He stops blaming his parents. He stops waiting for the world to see him. He stops demanding love and starts learning how to give it. He stops fearing the burden and begins to carry it. Jung believed that the modern man was in desperate need of initiation, and in the absence of tribal rites, he would need to find them in solitude, struggle, and spiritual practice. He must confront his past, reconcile with his shadow, and walk the painful road toward integration. To be reborn is not to be perfect, it is to be true. The man who accepts this path leaves behind the eternal boy, not with hatred, but with compassion. He sees the poor as a beautiful ghost who once protected him, and now must be buried with honor. He bows to the old self and steps into the unknown. That step, trembling, defiant, sacred, is where manhood begins. The mature man, the man who has faced his shadow, buried his boyhood illusions, and forged himself in the fires of responsibility, is not loud. He does not need to be. His presence speaks in silence. His life becomes a quiet cathedral of meaning, built not in haste, but in devotion. This is the man of substance, not because of wealth, status, or acclaim, but because of what he carries within: gravity, clarity, depth. He does not escape into fantasy, he builds reality. He does not demand love, he embodies it. He does not hide behind charm or wit or rebellion. He stands upright, rooted in something far older than trends or ego. Carl Jung believed that when a man aligns with his true self, he becomes not only an individual, but a channel, a conduit for the deeper forces of life, for archetypal wisdom, for the sacred masculine. He becomes a man not merely for himself, but for others, for his family, his community, his lineage, and the future he will never see. The man of substance is rare in the modern world because he cannot be mass-produced. He cannot be taught in schools or downloaded in podcasts. He is forged slowly through failure, solitude, inner war, and the sacred vow to keep going. He is not perfect, but he is real. Such men offer the world what it most lacks: integrity. In a culture of surface, they live from depth. In a time of reaction, they practice restraint. In an age of endless opinion, they act with conviction. They are not heroes of spectacle, but of stability. They build homes instead of hiding in them. They raise children without needing to be worshipped. They commit to their work, to their principles, to their woman, not because it is easy, but because they have learned the value of anchor over escape. Schopenhauer once wrote, "A man's character is the destiny of his fate." And the man of substance shapes fate by shaping himself. He does not wait to be seen, he sees. He does not ask life to give him something meaningful. He gives life meaning through his presence. He is not a boy waiting to be crowned. He is a king without a throne, sovereign over his own soul. In his quiet way, he heals the wound the man-child never could, not by returning to the past, but by redeeming the future through who he becomes today. Every man is born with potential, but not every man realizes it. Potential is raw energy, noble, yes, but incomplete. It is a seed, not a tree. And for the man-child, potential becomes a prison. He is told all his life that he could be great, that he is meant for more, that he has something special. But potential, without discipline and sacrifice, becomes torment. Carl Jung believed that the self calls each man toward his individuation, a life of inner harmony and outward purpose. But this journey cannot begin until potential is converted into action. The boy dreams, the man builds. The boy desires, the man commits. There is no final initiation without this transmutation, from vision to responsibility, from longing to labor. It is not enough to think, to feel, or to dream. The soul demands incarnation, that the inner light be made flesh in deeds, words, and choices. The tragedy of the man-child is not that he lacks vision, but that he refuses the cost of giving it form. He mistakes freedom for purpose and ends up enslaved by indecision. He says, "I'm not ready. I'm still figuring things out. One day I'll begin." And so his life becomes a series of delays, and his soul withers under the weight of what he never becomes. But the man, the true man, understands purpose is not discovered. It is chosen. It is wrestled from life, forged in the fires of responsibility, revealed in the doing. He does not wait for clarity. He steps into chaos and creates clarity. He does not wait for the muse. He becomes the instrument. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege cannot be inherited. It must be earned. Through courage, through repetition, through suffering that sculpts the spirit. The final initiation is not public. It is not celebrated. It happens in silence. The moment a man decides to live aligned with his deepest truth, regardless of reward or recognition. It is the moment he says, I will no longer betray my soul for comfort. I will no longer wait for permission. I will rise. And in that rising, he leaves the man-child behind. Not in cruelty, but in reverence. He honors the boy who survived, but he no longer lets him lead. He steps out of the cave, into the world, and into the sacred burden of becoming. Manhood does not begin with age. It does not begin with success. It does not begin when the world applauds you or when others finally approve. Manhood begins the moment you choose to stop running. It begins in silence, in that sacred space where a man confronts his own reflection and dares to ask, am I living as who I truly am? Carl Jung taught that the path of individuation, of becoming whole, is a journey few are willing to take because it demands everything false be stripped away. The masks, the excuses, the comforts, the borrowed beliefs. All of it must die for the real to emerge. And the real man is not a hero in shining armor. He is scarred. He is flawed. But he has chosen to face life rather than avoid it. He has buried the boy without burying wonder. He has kept his heart without losing his edge. He walks not ahead of others, but beside them. With eyes that have seen his own darkness and still choose to bring light. He does not seek to dominate, but to cultivate truth, integrity, and peace. He no longer blames the world nor his past. He does not live to impress. He lives to embody, to become a man who even in stillness speaks to the world. I have earned my soul. This is the end of the man-child, not through shame, but through transformation. He is not your enemy. He is the part of you that once protected you from pain, from responsibility, from becoming. But now, that protection has become a prison, and you hold the key. Step forward, not as a perfect man, but as an honest one, because manhood is not about power. It is about presence, not about being real, not about arrival, but about walking every day toward the sacred task of carrying your name with honor. This is where manhood begins, here, now, with you. If this journey has stirred something in you, if you've seen the man-child not just in others, but in yourself, do not despair. You are not broken. You are becoming. And the world needs the man you are called to be. Reflect in the comments. Share your story. Speak not for attention, but to be part of the chain, a lineage of men who refuse to remain asleep. And if you seek more wisdom, more insight drawn from Jung, Aurelius Schopenhauer, and the deep waters of the human soul, subscribe. This path is not meant to be walked alone. The ancient voices still echo. And now it is your turn to answer.